My name's Katelyn. I worked at the ICA for about a year. I've also worked at the Columbus Museum of Art and the Crocker Art Museum in California. I currently work at Mount Auburn Cemetery as a cemetery teacher. I'm an educator. I have lived all over the world. And my piece is called Brainstorm, which is a pretty accurate description of the landscape of my mind. I really struggle to think this way. My thoughts kind of go everywhere. And for me, as a human being, I think some of us have talked about this a little bit. I really struggle to fit in all the little rectangles that we have in our world. Putting my thoughts in text messages or emails or on screens, any of the boxes doesn't really work. So I find it extremely ironic that I'm standing under all these rectangles and squares as my artwork. But when I read Yolanda's description of this show, I really wanted to see what I could do to kind of translate what it's like to be in my brain. It's very noisy and it's very chaotic and it's full of many beautiful things, but sometimes they escape me before I have a chance to kind of like grab a hold of them. So I wanted to take a moment to sort of map that out a little bit. It's kind of like a crime scene, which is not all that inaccurate either. So I think that something that I've learned a lot in the museum is they talk in this world a lot about pieces of art being windows and doors, which is really interesting, more rectangles. But as an educator, this concept is something that actually comes out of education. And it's a concept that has to do with intersectionality in education. And there's a third component that the museum world often leaves out. And I think that it's windows and mirrors that art museums talk about. Windows being a peek into another world, and mirrors being something that reflects you. But in the education space, they also talk about doors. And I think that is something that the art world can so easily provide, but doesn't when it's institutionalized in spaces like museums. And at the heart of it, I'm an educator, and what's really important to me is figuring out ways to open doors to bring people in, because I know that these little rectangles and squares do have the power to open doors for people. What's kind of nice about photography in particular is it's something that when you look at a picture, you know that you're not seeing the whole thing. You know that there's something that's been cut out and very intentionally cropped. Photography is a very weird medium to practice. It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And I've been accused before, believe it or not, of editing my photos. Believe it or not, I do that. I think that is maybe what makes it an art form at a certain point. If I turned in one of those rectangular essays without editing it, my mom would get mad. So I think that as much as I hate being surrounded by these like boxes and stuff that I try to fit myself in, it's really quite interesting. I mean, I know that you were talking about sort of like conflict and contrast in your work and like looking at that and confronting it a lot. And I think that the art world has the power to give you a space to do that. As an educator, it's really important for me to create comfortable spaces for people to be uncomfortable. This is not really a place that I feel comfortable right now. Standing in front of you guys under my work is really quite intense. But now I work in a space with different kinds of rectangles that tell different stories. And it's really important for me when I think about the things that we can talk about in community spaces, collaboration is really the thing that I think will get us through into the next places that we need to be in the world. It will be people that think out of the box, that make a difference. So I don't know, what's been really cool for me in this project has been the experience of working with everyone and doing this. The first in-person show that we did at Downtown Crossing was fucking wild. It was wild and it was really cool. And what was really neat was getting to stand in that space, in a space full of the art of my friends, and invite people in, strangers walking down the street and being like, come in, come hang out, come look at this, and people being like, oh my God, you guys just fucking did this with your friends? Which is wild, it's wild to say. And Yolanda really truly just went out there and started cold calling people, which is amazing. And we all came together and we all built this. And what's interesting about pieces of art, and this is something that the art museum world in particular values, is just those finished products on the wall, right? They don't show you all the process that happens behind it, and that's where the magic is. And I think that's what's interesting. You look at my work, you know you're not seeing the whole thing, but again, it is my process that makes the way I think beautiful, and it's valid, but it certainly doesn't fit in any of those boxes, so there we go. Oh, any questions? Yes, Claire.
How do you think seeing your work like this as opposed to, you know, regular print or seeing your photographs on a screen like changes that for you?
That's a really great question. The first time I saw my work in large format was actually at the Columbus Museum of Art. What's kind of interesting is I started my Instagram, this is so stupid, right before starting working there, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna be working with a bunch of artists, you guys, I have to like understand the process. So I was like, oh, let me remember this skill that I used to do, and I'm gonna practice putting my work out there, because I think that's a big thing that artists confront that is really difficult. Sharing your art is like the hardest part of it, I think. So I started doing that, and a year after working there, they had an Instagram show, and my friend was curating it, and they put my work up in the show. And that was the first time I'd seen my picture, not just big, but like outside of my phone. And that was hectic. I hated it. I mean, it was good, it was fine, but yeah, I don't know, it's very weird. It's very weird to see it. This feels like slightly more successful. When I was trying to explain what this would be like to poor Yolanda, she was like, okay, well, I'm your friend and I trust you, I'll just let you do it. But I didn't know even how to share with her what I was thinking of doing, and so I just did it. I think it's fine, it's weird, I don't know. It's really cool to see it with everyone else's work, I think. I just learned so much doing this stuff with everybody. That was the best part of it. And so what is even weirder is people interacting with it when I'm not there. So my friends sending me pictures from the opening, which I didn't go to, of like people looking at my work. That was hectic. That was really wild, but I really loved it.
I think one thing that's really beautiful, I mean, when you were talking off camera, we talked a lot about, you and I and other people, like kind of like the possible, I don't know what the word is, it's really weighted in my brain, but like the possible gifts we can share with each other is like a way of being in the world. And I think one thing that's nice about sharing on Instagram and even at Columbus Museum, where like even though you work like you were in your room 24/7, and then here where people like are here morning, noon, night, is like people not, some of us came to see your work there, but like a lot of people not knowing your work and just having the joy of being like, there's like photos on strings and like, oh my God, and like that like gift you're giving without knowing you're giving it is kind of beautiful. Especially like, and that kind of matches I think what you try to do as a person, is like this like gift cycle with people, whether it's stories or care or like observations or like taking no bullshit in the world, like it's all gift giving.
Well,
so this is like giving gifts to strangers who like walk down the street.
A little bit. It's weird, and it's weird like releasing that and knowing it was gonna live outside of your body and mind, and you just have to like trust that with people. I think what's interesting about starting to work in museums is, y'all, I thought I was so fancy when I got my first job in a museum. I was like, I have a vibe, I'm about to be rich, I'm a society lady now. And then I got there and I was like, oh, but where's the food bank? And it was interesting that to me, what was interesting is that like most of the artistic minds that I was seeing within the institution were front of house and were not part of the conversation at all. Museums have a really powerful chance to be like empowering and like creating a through line between like those who are valuing and like stating what is worth knowing about art and those who are actually practicing it, who are very rarely the people with money and power. So yeah, I don't know. I think sharing and like building these spaces like we've done and like Yolanda did in particular is incredibly powerful because we did that shit for almost no money. That's wild. We don't need this building leaning into the water. Sorry, I see it. Sorry. Any other questions?
I'm just like looking at the gap between the photos. Just wondering, well, so it kind of reminded me of like postcards.
So most of my photos have been taken on my travels. It's interesting because these really are almost all like taken out of a window. These are truly like windows for me into different worlds. I've had the opportunity to live in a lot of places and see a lot of things. And yeah, I started taking photos because, well, people always tell me to write my stories down, but again, I can't. It drives me fucking crazy. Because again, my stories never fit into that box, and a story is an interaction to me. It's like chemistry, right? You can't just like, some people have the ability to write it down and like share it, but I don't. The closest I can do is show you what I see, and that's really hard to do because I see a million things a second, and transferring that to other people is just, it's too much. But the brainstorming process and working with other people and collaborating really helps because it allows me to spread my ideas around, and that feels really good in a way that's kind of hard to explain.
A scatological organization.
Yeah. I mean, I have ADHD and I'm on the autism spectrum, so it's just that my brain like literally doesn't move like that, which is fine sometimes. Not when you're trying to like function in a world that isn't made for you. Yeah. Thank you, guys.